Hey guys, tonight we're trudging deep into the soggy, sudsy world of medieval laundry, a place where soap stinks, sleeves freeze, and dignity goes to die in a wooden tub. You're waking up in a thatched cottage, well before the rooster even considers his job. It's pitch black. The hearth is barely glowing with yesterday's coals, and you're already regretting your life choices. Today is wash day, and that, in your century, is a full-contact sport. You slide out from under a scratchy wool blanket, nose already alert to the sour tang of old linen and wood smoke. Your shift smells lived in. So does everything else. Because in the Middle Ages, everything smells like a compost pile trying its best. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where you're all listening from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You scoop up an armload of crusty tunics and stiff woolen hose, and tiptoe across the icy floorboards. Outside, your breath fogs in the moonlight. You join the other women in the village, because yes, laundry is gendered labor, and the procession to the stream begins. Let's pause and appreciate this. The river isn't heated. There's no laundry soap. You're hauling 2 wooden buckets and a paddle club called a beetle that looks more suited for medieval warfare than washing socks. You kneel at the bank, and your knees are instantly wet and freezing. Water soaks through the hem of your skirts. You start scrubbing a shirt against a ribbed washing board, or, more likely, a rough flat stone. The shirt is so stiff it could probably stand trial on its own. And the water? It's melted snow runoff. Your fingers go numb before you finish the first sleeve. Meanwhile, your neighbor Agnes is already whacking a pair of breeches with her beetle like they insulted her stew. The rhythmic thwack 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 echoes off the frosty trees like a sleepy war drum. You dunk, wring, and slap the garments with a technique passed down from your grandmother. It's efficient, kind of, but mostly painful. There's a reason nobody misses this era. Mainstream historians agree that medieval laundry was a weekly or bi-weekly affair, depending on status and season. But historians still argue whether rural peasants bothered with it that often, or just waited until their clothes begged for mercy. Meanwhile, if you're washing wool, and you probably are, you're trying not to agitate it too much, or it felts into a miniature knight's tunic. A felted shirt is warm, but about as flexible as a toasted tortilla. And remember, this is all happening before breakfast. There's no sweet-smelling detergent, no dials to turn, no satisfying ding when your clothes are done. Just sore arms, red fingers, and the knowledge that you've still got to haul it all back up the hill, wring it again, and maybe hang it, if the weather allows. Also, did we mention that your stream is downstream from the pig farm? Yep, fresh is a relative term. One fringe theory suggests that some folks even chose laundry days based on moon phases or St. calendars. Mondays were common, but some superstitions warned against washing on certain feast days, lest you offend a local saint and end up with moldy tunics for a year. And if your village only has one washing spot, you're on a rotating schedule. Miss your day, and you're out of luck. It's not like you can pop down to a medieval laundromat. As the sun creeps above the hedgerows, you catch your reflection in the icy water. You look tired, because you are, and you've only finished half a bundle. A neighbor groans that her beetle cracked on a frozen doublet. Another woman is trying to fish a sock out from under a chunk of ice. Someone else sneezes aggressively into the wash basin. There's a certain camaraderie here, though. A shared damn misery. You trade gossip, sigh together, and occasionally break into laughter when someone accidentally scrubs the same tunic twice. Still, your back aches. Your wrists burn, and you silently curse whoever decided that white linen was fashionable in a mud-based society. By late morning, the sun's risen enough to take the chill off the air. Your clothes are washed, technically. They're still damp, and they smell mostly like stream. But compared to how they started, you'll take it. You gather the bundle, wrap it in burlap, and head back toward your cottage. A pig trots alongside you for part of the journey, sniffing curiously at your clean tunic. You politely decline its help, and as you near your door, your neighbor calls out, See you next week, if we're lucky and the ice doesn't claim us first. You're back home now, but don't get too cozy. You're not done yet. That heavy, wet pile of clean clothes you just lugged in from the river is now sitting in the corner like a passive-aggressive ghost, radiating cold and musty disdain. And now it's time to lather, soak, or boil, depending on what your nose tells you still isn't quite clean enough. Welcome to the magic potions of medieval washing: lye, fermented urine, and a generous scoop of pure medieval elbow grease. Let's start with lye. You might have heard of it from modern soap making, but back then, lye wasn't neatly labeled or bought at a store. You made it from ashes. Wood ashes were steeped in water for days to produce a caustic, slimy solution that could, theoretically, clean your linens or melt your hands off. You pour a scoop of homemade lye water over your linen shirt, scrunch your nose, and start rubbing it in with your knuckles like you're tenderizing meat. It smells faintly like wet campfire and regret. Now, if you really need to get the tough stains out, especially the yellowing underarms of someone's only tunic, you reach for the power move: stale human urine. Yep, pee. In fact, in medieval England, it was politely called chamber lye, and it was aged to perfection like a fine wine that nobody wants to drink. And no, you didn't need to harvest it yourself. Many towns had urine collectors who'd swing by households and gather the donations in large barrels. This wasn't a side hustle. It was an actual job. Think milkman, but grosser. There's evidence that fullers, those folks who cleaned wool on an industrial scale, used urine vats to soak cloth before pounding it with their feet in huge tubs. Historians still argue whether urine was used more for degreasing wool or whitening linens, but either way, it was a splashy business. As you kneel near your own little boiling pot, you glance around nervously. There's always that one neighbor who accuses you of overusing the lye or hogging the ashes. Never mind the fact that she once dropped a petticoat into someone else's laundry pot and pretended it wasn't hers. You're not bitter, just observant. To distract yourself, you sniff one of the wet tunics. Mistake. It still smells like someone wrestled a goat in it during a thunderstorm, which, to be fair, might have happened. A fringe belief from medieval herbalists claimed that adding rosemary or lavender to the rinsed water helped not only with the smell, but also to ward off melancholy humors. That's a nice thought. So you grab a few crushed herbs from the pantry, or what passes for one, and sprinkle them over the boiling pot. The scent rises like a ghost of modern laundry pods. You stir the pot with a wooden paddle, careful not to splash. Boiling fabric is an art. Leave it in too long, and you risk fading your only blue tunic to a splotchy gray. Take it out too soon, and the mud streaks will laugh at you until next week. One sock escapes your grip and plops deep into the bubbling water. You chase it with a spoon, muttering about how socks are always planning their escape, no matter the century. As the clothes cool, you wring them out with stiff hands, arms trembling. That weird seamstress in the next village, she claims she builds finger strength by crushing walnuts. You might need to join her, because these wet linens are about as easy to wring as a slab of granite. You drape the rinsed clothes over chairs, benches, and a few lines hung across your cottage. Outside, still too damp to risk the breeze. Inside, it's humid, warm, and smells like hot wool and hope. Your cat has already found the cleanest, sunniest spot on the tunic pile and is licking itself with medieval smugness. By now, you've spent hours on this process. You have it eaten. Your arms are jelly. And worst of all, you just found a pair of hose under the bed that you completely forgot about. There's a brief moment of personal crisis. Do you add them to the next wash? Try to sneak them in now. Burn them and claim they were stolen by fairies? Mainstream records from monasteries and noble households show laundry logs that noted not just who washed what, but also who got blamed when things shrank, ripped, or smelled like old fish. Laundry wasn't just a chore. It was social performance. If your linens looked dingy, people whispered, and if you were working in a castle or a large household, there were actual rules for how to handle each item. Undergarments had to be separated. Linens from noble rooms were washed with extra care. And no one was allowed to confuse Lord Bartholomew's nightshirt with Lord Percival's. In fact, some estates employed a laundress-in-chief, who managed multiple assistants. One would haul water, another stirred the pot, and another was in charge of drying and folding. You, on the other hand, are all three, plus cook, plus mother, plus unofficial village therapist when someone needs to cry over their husband's ill habits. Your hands are red and raw. Your knees ache. You've invented 3 new swear words under your breath, but the pile is slowly transforming from unclean horror to mildly wearable. You stretch your back and gaze at the mess of fabric, now steaming gently in the hearth's heat. Success? Kind of. At least until someone steps in a puddle, and you have to do it all again. You wake the next morning hoping, praying, that the clothes have dried overnight. Spoiler, they have not. Your cottage smells like damp wool, slightly cooked linen, and a vague undertone of wet dog, even though you don't own one. The shirts are cold to the touch, and one pair of hose seems to have frozen into an abstract sculpture. You gingerly tug it off the drying rack, wondering if legs were always this shape or if the hose are judging you. And now comes the third act of this tragic laundry opera: beating, brushing, and bleaching. The post-wash fuss that determines whether your tunic looks freshly laundered or was possibly buried for 3 weeks. You start with the beating. Yes, again, because apparently no amount of medieval laundry is complete without giving your garments a final tenderized farewell. This isn't just for drying, though yes, thwacking the cloth helps release moisture. It's also for fluffing the fibers, breaking stiffness, and punishing your shirt for being so hard to clean in the first place. You take your beetle, your trusty laundry club, and give the stiffest garments a few good whacks across a bench. The sound echoes through your cottage like soft applause for your suffering. Mainstream historical texts mention this post-wash pounding as common in both rural homes and noble estates. Sometimes it was done on flat, fulling boards, and sometimes on large stones in the yard. Either way, it was loud, repetitive, and frankly, a decent way to air your grievances. You mutter about your husband never helping and whack a tunic. Grumble about your cousin borrowing your only nice apron. Another whack. Think about the local baker raising bread prices again. Whack. Across the village, others are doing the same, and the air is filled with rhythmic thudding. It's like laundry-based Morse code. I hate Mondays. Womp womp. My kid spilled stew again. Womp. Can't wait for laundry day to be outlawed. Womp. Next comes brushing. You've got an old sheaf of dried thistle stalks tied together, or maybe a coarse horsehair brush, depending on your household's tool collection. You drag it across each garment, lifting dirt particles and combing out uneven threads. It's oddly satisfying, though the brush doesn't go easy on your knuckles if you slip. Historians still argue whether brushing was a standard practice across all households or more of a noble habit passed down from estate laundresses. But there's decent evidence that brushing was essential in wool-heavy households, especially those dealing with finer, dyed fabrics. You hum as you work, absent-mindedly flicking a few bristles off your skirt. The brushing feels less laborious, almost meditative. You catch yourself daydreaming of a world where tunics wash themselves. A dangerous fantasy, but you let it linger. Then the real magic begins, bleaching. Not with chemicals, oh no. This is the era of sun bleaching, and if the sun's out, you make the most of it. You carry your damp whites outside, squinting against the sudden brightness, and spread them across hedges, grass, or even ropes strung between trees. White clothes, prized by both pious monks and ambitious housewives, were the pinnacle of laundry pride. They told people you could afford clean linen, and time to clean it, but bleaching them to that high medieval white was a whole ritual. In some regions, you'd first smear the garments with more wood ash or even a paste of chalk and water before setting them out in the sun. The mixture would slowly dry and flake off, supposedly taking the stains with it. A fringe theory from 13th century washing guides mentions that donkey milk was sometimes used to soak delicate linen garments before bleaching. Whether that was effective or just really expensive milk wasting is still debated. You glance over your whites with pride as they flutter slightly in the breeze. The sun hits the linen just right, and for a moment, it all feels worth it. That is, until a goose waddles over and sits on your best chemise. You shoo it away, muttering about poultry problems, and try to reposition the now goose-creased fabric. Still, the day is bright, and the clothes are slowly drying. It's the best outcome you could have hoped for. As you sit on a stone bench, watching over your linen like a protective parent, you sip something warm, maybe a weak ale or barley tea, depending on your region. This is the one peaceful moment in the entire laundry ordeal. The hard part is mostly over, unless, of course, it rains. A few towns over, your cousin deals with exactly that. Her washed linens are dripping from branches, and she's standing in the mud, crying quietly into her apron. You send good thoughts her way. Every medieval washer deserves a moment of solidarity. One last chore remains, folding and storing. You gather the sun-bleached, slightly wrinkled clothes and begin folding them in tight squares. There's no dresser, no IKEA unit, just a chest or a shelf above the hearth. You stack tunics, chemises, hose, and caps, arranging them with care. A clean shift is a precious thing. You want to savor it, at least until someone spills broth on it. A passing neighbor peeks in and nods approvingly. "Got your linens done early, I see," she says, with only a hint of envy. You nod graciously, as though your back doesn't feel like it was beaten with your own beetle. The chore is finished for now, but already a rogue muddy footprint appears near the door. Someone's going to need a wash soon. Probably you. Just when you think you've escaped laundry's clutches for a while, reality taps you on the shoulder, and then throws a dirty shift at your face. Because in the medieval world, clothes don't just get dirty on wash day. They get dirty constantly, and fast, especially when most people owned, on average, maybe 2 outfits. So now let's take a breath and zoom out. You've survived a whole cycle of medieval washing, but how often did this soul-squeezing ritual actually happen? The answer, not as often as you'd hope. For most peasants, laundry was a once-a-season ordeal. Maybe once a month if you were especially motivated or had a lot of children with poor aim at the dinner table. The wealthy, of course, could afford more frequent washes, but even they weren't exactly sparkling clean by modern standards. You shuffle around your home, eyeing the stack of barely folded linens and wondering how long they'll last before someone's rear end sweats clean through a woolen kirtle. Spoiler, not long. Let's talk laundry frequency and survival strategies, because you didn't exactly have a rotation of 20 clean outfits waiting in the wings. You had maybe one everyday tunic and one for Sunday. Maybe. If you were noble or in a religious order, you might have had 3. The pinnacle of luxury. Instead of washing all the time, you spot cleaned. You turned garments inside out. You layered up to hide the dirt. You hung things near the fire to air them out. A polite way of saying, roast the stench until it's only moderately offensive. Historians still argue whether most medieval people were more nose-blind than us, or if they genuinely had a higher tolerance for their own funk. Some texts suggest perfume sachets and lavender bundles tucked into sleeves to ward off the worst of it. Others point out that, well, everyone stank, so no one noticed. There were also social rules about when laundry should be done. In some towns, Saturday was the official wash day. In others, it was strictly forbidden to do laundry on the Sabbath or during feast days, which sounds relaxing until you realize that feast days popped up constantly, meaning your dirty linens just waited. You venture outside again and pass by your neighbor, Agnes. She's scrubbing a cap in a bucket and muttering to herself about her daughter tracking in sheep dung. Agnes is what you'd call a laundry minimalist. She swears by washing only collars and cuffs and beating the rest with a stick until it behaves. You nod respectfully and pretend you haven't considered the same. A common trick to keep clothes clean between washes? Undergarments as barriers. You'd wear a linen shift under everything. It absorbed sweat, oil, and grime, keeping your outer layers cleaner for longer. The shift was easier to wash and faster to dry. Basically, the medieval version of a base layer and laundry hack rolled into one. And yes, even noble women wore them. Some accounts describe intricate, fine-woven shifts that were changed often, even daily, while the rest of the gown remained untouched by water or human soap for weeks. For those working in fields or with animals, shifts took the brunt of the labor. You come home, Peel off your outer tunic, and you've still got a shift clinging to your frame, heavy with the scent of hay, sweat, and ambition. You'll rinse it in the river if you're lucky, or just hang it in the breeze and let the wind take the guilt. And if you're feeling fancy, there's always the smoke box, a wooden chest lined with herbs, lavender, rosemary, thyme, where you hang garments to soak in a cloud of gentle perfume. Some monasteries even use scented smoke in dedicated chambers to refresh church garments between proper washes. Probably smelled like heaven, or at least like a tolerable funeral. You look at your own drying corner and consider converting it into a poor man's smoke box. Maybe if you burn the right herbs, you can fool your nose into thinking the socks are clean. It's worth a try. And still, accidents happen. You find a mysterious smear on your best overdress. You don't remember where it came from. Soup, soot, a vengeful child's apple. It's best not to ask. You dab it with a damp rag and pray to Saint Hannah, patron saint of washerwomen, that it doesn't stain. Fun fact, Saint Hannah was a real person, a noblewoman from Alsace in the 7th century who became famous for washing the clothes of the poor. So much so that the church canonized her. Proof, if you needed it, that laundry miracles are possible, but rare. Meanwhile, the nobility had a different rhythm. Their linens were often embroidered, delicate, and full of fabric that absolutely did not want to be boiled. So their laundresses became experts at delicate handling, rinsing in rose water, beating with padded bats, drying on carved racks inside guarded courtyards. Also, Lord Percy's nightshirt didn't lose its shimmer. You don't have a courtyard. You have a goat that keeps nibbling on your drying socks. But hey, it's still progress. And if all else fails, there's the fire trick. When a tunic really stinks, and there's no time to wash it, you hold it up to the hearth's flames. Let the smoke soak into it. Turn it a few times like a sausage. It won't be cleaner, but it'll smell less like despair and more like roasted oak. It's an illusion, but in medieval fashion, illusions matter. So you fold your last semi-clean shift, sigh, and look at the weather again. Clouds rolling in. You might have another wash day sooner than you'd like. Your knees still ache from the last laundry day, and your fingernails are permanently gray from ash and lye. But rest isn't in the cards just yet. Today you're on duty, not as a washer, but as a water hauler, fire stoker, and heat watcher. Because heating water in the medieval world is its own special nightmare. You begin the day by squinting up at the sky. A dry morning, thankfully, but cold. The kind of cold that makes your joints creak like an old door and your breath hang around longer than some of your relatives. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and head to the well, wooden bucket in hand. The rope is frozen. You curse gently under your breath, then tug until it creaks and groans like an elderly mule. You lower the bucket, hear the satisfying splash, and crank it back up again, arms trembling with effort. You repeat this 7, 8, 9 times, enough to fill your cauldron at home. One mainstream historical source from 14th century England notes that heating water for laundry could take up to 2 hours, depending on the fuel and the size of your pot. You believe it, especially since you've just spent 30 minutes acquiring the water in the first place. Once home, you carefully pour it into your iron cauldron, which rests on a tripod over your hearth. The hearth is the heart of your house, and also the scene of most of your frustrations. The smoke, the firewood, the uneven heat. It's like trying to boil a river using a spoon and optimism. You stack firewood below the cauldron and strike your flint. A few sparks catch. The fire stutters, then roars, licking at the iron like it hasn't eaten in days. Now you wait. Not idly, of course not. While the water heats, you scrub the floor with a rag soaked in last week's wash water, boil a weak onion for breakfast, and yell at a child to stop poking the dog with a broom. Multitasking medieval edition. By the time the water steams, just short of boiling, you feel like you've already done a full day's labor. You stir the cauldron with a long stick, checking the temperature with the back of your hand like some sort of village alchemist. There were no thermometers, no temperature gauges, just instincts and experience. Hot enough to clean, not hot enough to scald your fingers or melt your woolens. A fine balance. Historians still argue whether most households boiled their laundry water to true heat, or just got it very warm. The truth likely varied. In monasteries and noble homes, full-time laundresses could afford the time and firewood to keep a rolling boil. But in homes like yours, you're lucky if it simmers. Once it's ready, you ladle the steaming water into your wooden washtub, where you've already scattered ash, bits of crushed soapwood, and maybe even a lump of tallow. The smell is earthy, strong, a bit like boiled tree and old bacon. It's not bad exactly, just deeply honest. This is the part where your back starts to groan before you even lift a finger. You take a deep breath, brace your arms on the edge of the tub, and begin soaking the next batch of linens. Maybe it's your child's undershift. Maybe it's your husband's leggings that somehow smell worse now than before they were washed. Either way, you plunge them in. You agitate the fabric gently, lifting and dunking with rhythmic care. There's no real luxury here. No soap bubbles or floral scents. Just warm water, ash, and the desperate hope that it's doing something. 4 tougher stains, like the ones on your apron from that wild beach stew. You grab a little chunk of homemade soap, made from lye and animal fat. It's crumbly, greasy, and about as glamorous as a slug. But it works. You rub it into the fabric, scrubbing with the heel of your hand until the stain starts to fade. Maybe you're sweating now. Not from the fire, but from the effort. Medieval laundry is hot work, even in winter. You wipe your brow with your sleeve, which is ironic, since it too needs washing. And let's not forget the fire. You're constantly tending it, feeding it with sticks, stirring the coals, making sure it doesn't die down too early or flare up too fast. Once, your cousin let her fire go out halfway through wash day, and she had to reheat everything from scratch. Took 6 hours. She cried for most of them. You remember that story and toss in an extra log, just to be safe. At this point, your entire house smells like hot water, wet linen, ash, and smoke. A medieval candle store's worst seller. But you push on, because clean-ish clothes aren't going to wash themselves. And once the water cools slightly, you pour it back into the cauldron to reheat. Reuse is everything. Water is precious, and firewood even more so. Meanwhile, outside, a washerwoman down the road is trying a different method. She's boiling her linens in a pot right over an outdoor fire, a method known in some regions as pot washing. She uses a stick to stir the garments in a bubbling stew of soapwood and boiling water, like some kind of domestic witch. You admire her spirit from afar. It looks very smoky. Eventually, your tub is filled with limp, wet clothes. Your arms are jelly, and your knees threaten rebellion. But the water is hot, and the garments are slowly surrendering to your will. You pull out the last piece, steam rising from the folds, and squeeze it out. You hang it near the hearth to dry, then collapse onto the bench, palms aching. Just then, a breeze from the chimney swirls ash into the air. A few flakes settle gently onto your freshly washed tunic. You laugh, because what else can you do? The sun is inching higher, and your laundry is finally washed, or at least soaked, squeezed, and vaguely improved. Now begins a new challenge, drying. And while that sounds simple, don't let your modern comforts deceive you. In medieval life, drying laundry is a strategic operation, a battle against weather, wildlife, and gravity. First problem, space. You look around your cottage. There's no such thing as a dedicated laundry room, unless you count the bit of wall behind the hearth, where things tend to steam themselves crispy. And outside, well, that's a gamble. Clouds are rolling in, and last time you hung your linen chemise from the hedge, the neighbor's goose made off with it, honked triumphantly as it went. So you turn to the tried-and-true method, drying lines and furniture backs. You string a bit of cord near the fireplace, weighted on either end with stones. You drape a pair of damp hose over your chair backs. You balance a shift on the rafter beam and hope it doesn't drip directly into the soup. It does. You ignore it. In monasteries and large households, there were dedicated drying rooms, long, airy halls with pegs and rods and slanted grates near the ceiling. But here, in your one-room hut, drying is more like Tetris. If a goat can't reach it and it won't block the doorway, it's fair game. Now, here's where medieval science kicks in. You try to dry different fabrics at different speeds. Linen, quick drying, so it goes up first. Wool, thick, heavy, and suspicious of change. Needs more heat, more time, and careful flipping to avoid permanent creases that'll dig into your shoulders like tiny judgmental elbows. You hold up your husband's heavy woolen tunic and sigh. It's like wringing a soaked dog. You twist it with all your strength, water trickling down your arms and soaking your shoes. Again, and here's a little-known fact. Medieval people often half-dried wool indoors, then finished it outside in dappled shade to avoid stiffening. Too much sun, and the fibers would crisp. Not enough, and mildew would set in. You become a weather oracle, poking your head out, testing the breeze with a damp rag. Historians still argue whether certain regions preferred sun-drying versus hearth-drying. Some manuscripts recommend laying linens over rosemary hedges, while others warn that smoke-drying near the hearth creates a permanent bacon smell. Which, to be fair, might not be a bad thing. Out in the yard, you hammer 2 rough poles into the mud and string a third across the top. A makeshift drying frame. You hang your smalls there, linens, undergarments, socks, secured with little wooden pegs whittled by your youngest. During a week, he couldn't leave the house for sneezing at church. Medieval punishment is creative, but drying isn't just functional. It's communal. You look down the lane and spot 3 other women hanging tunics over hedges and fences. They wave with the kind of weary, shared understanding only laundry people know. Someone's singing a folk tune. Someone else is shouting at a pig who's developed a taste for laces. And now the sun comes out in full. That watery golden light that makes everything feel briefly poetic, even if you're elbow deep in wet socks. Of course, no drying session is complete without unexpected rain. You glance at the horizon and see a gray smear coming your way. You've got 20, maybe 30 minutes. You hustle like never before, flipping garments, repositioning woolen hose, waving a stick at the curious goose, now eyeing your drying chemise again. This is the part where you wish you had a proper wringer. In some wealthier towns, barrel wringers, big wooden rollers turned by crank, were used to press water from fabric. But in your world, it's all elbow grease and prayer. You turn the drying tunic again. It's steaming slightly in the sun, almost dry. You whisper encouragement to it, like it's a racing horse. Come on, you stubborn pile of damp. It's you versus the clouds now. And here comes the next obstacle. Lint and soot. Inhaling ash is bad enough, but having it settle into your clean shift. Infuriating. You flap each garment gently, trying to dislodge any stray bits before they become permanent features. You remember a tip passed down from your grandmother. Hang white linens in moonlight for brightness. Does it work? Unclear. Historians aren't sure if it was superstition, early photo bleaching science, or just a poetic excuse to leave chores unfinished until morning. Either way, it's oddly soothing to imagine. Finally, things are dryish. Not bone dry, but not sopping. You sniff one tunic. It smells like air, smoke, and just a hint of goat. That's good enough. You begin folding. Slowly, carefully. Medieval garments are precious. Seams are hand-stitched. Repairs take time and thread. You don't fold like we do today. No drawers to tuck things into. You roll some, hang others on pegs. Lay the rest flat under the bed platform to keep them from wrinkling. You hear the first drops hit the roof, just as you bring in the last item. Victory. But wait, where's your one good apron? You dash outside, heart sinking. It's there, snagged on the corner of the fence. Drenched. Again. You squeeze it half-heartedly and toss it over the hearth rack. Tomorrow, maybe. Or next week. You look around your home now. Lines draped with drying shifts, steam curling into the rafters, the fire still crackling low. It smells like warmth, soap, and just the faintest hint of satisfaction. You haven't bathed. You're covered in flecks of ash and bubbles of sweat. But your clothes? They're cleaner than yesterday. That counts. And with luck, you won't have to do this again for at least a month. You wake up sore. Not just slept on a futon sore, but the kind of deep, full-body medieval ache that comes from hauling water, stirring vats of hot liquid, and negotiating peace treaties with stubborn woolen hoes. But it's a new day, and that means the final phase of laundry duty, beating and brushing. Yes, even after washing and drying, your clothes still need some encouragement to be wearable. Let's start with the beating. Now, you're not entirely sure if this step helps or just makes you feel better after 2 days of laundry-induced trauma. But tradition is tradition, and in the medieval world, beating was a standard part of textile maintenance. You grab your flat wooden paddle, more than tool, and start to rhythmically thwack your dry linens across the long bench outside your door. The sound echoes pleasantly down the lane. Your neighbor, Greta, gives you a nod. She's already on her 3rd shift. The beating serves a few purposes. It softens stiff fibers, knocks out leftover dust or ash, and provides free anger therapy. You focus on a particularly uncooperative smock and imagine it's the tax collector. Very soothing. Historians still debate whether this method was done before or after drying, or both. Some say linen was beaten wet to remove soap and grime. Others insist it was done dry to fluff the fabric. Either way, your arms are working overtime again. Next, brushing. You grab your comb brush, handmade of course, with bristles from horsehair tied into a wooden block, and start running it down your husband's woolen tunic. The goal? Depill, decrust, and decrinkle. Wool in particular is prone to becoming stiff and weirdly shiny if ignored. You gently drag the bristles over it, muttering to yourself about the mystery staying near the shoulder. Some medieval households use dried teasels, spiky seed heads, to brush cloth. They catch on wool fibers and pull them upright, almost like giving the garment a good stretch and a compliment. There's even evidence that entire textile shops had people paid solely to raise the nap of woolen cloth. Imagine professional fluffers of the 14th century. Of course, you're not paid. You're doing this for love. Or at least because the church frowns on showing up smelly. You take a step back and survey the scene. Brushed, beaten, dried garments lie folded in a neat pile. Each piece represents hours of labor, weeks of sweat, a lifetime of perfected routine. There's a rhythm to it, you realize. A process passed down through generations, from the time when great-grandmothers squatted by rivers and used rocks instead of washtubs. It's evolved, sure, but only just. You're still working with your hands, still battling the elements, still hoping the dog doesn't pee on the drying rack. Speaking of evolution, let's talk lye again. The really strong stuff. Some households, especially those with a bit of spare time or access to a lye leaching barrel, would make ultra-potent soap bases for deep cleaning heavier cloth. Picture this: a tall wooden bucket filled with fireplace ash, water poured slowly over the top, filtered through a sieve of straw and stones until it drips out the bottom like soapy tea. Smells like scorched earth and bad decisions. You've made it once, just once, burned 3 fingers and nearly choked on the fumes. Never again. Still, you do admire the chemistry of it all. No one would call medieval peasants scientists, but they understood the elements. Hot, cold, dry, wet, ash, water, fat, fiber. The recipes were oral, sure, but tested, improved, and remembered. As you pick up a particularly delicate undershift, a fine bit of linen with a little embroidery near the collar, you give it one last shake and a brush with your hand. You made this one, wove it on the loom, sewed it by firelight, washed it carefully by hand. And now here it is, ready to face another round of medieval life. And now for a quick moment of panic. Where's the sock? You had a full pair of woolen hose, one of the good ones, with the patch still holding strong, and now only one remains. You turn slowly, eyes narrowing, and spot it. On the fence. Again. That blasted goose. It honks as you approach. You negotiate. You offer a crust of bread. It accepts. Peace is restored, sock reclaimed. With the laundry now softened, sorted, and properly fluffed, you begin the last phase of garment maintenance, repairs. That's right, because once you've washed everything, you can suddenly see just how many seams have come undone. You sigh. You sit by the hearth, fish your bone needle from the wooden bowl on the shelf, and begin to stitch. A torn hem here, a loose thread there. In medieval life, you wear things until they fall apart, and then a bit longer. Patching is part of the cycle. Some garments you even reinforce on purpose. The elbows of your husband's tunic get extra layers. The knees of the children's hose are practically more patch than original cloth. You remember the old joke, if it's still holding your parts in, it's good enough. As the fire crackles and the smell of wool and wood smoke swirls around you, your hands move almost without thinking. Stitch, snip, smooth. The motions lull you, and for once, the house is quiet. Even the goose seems to be reflecting. Outside, the weather has shifted again. A soft drizzle dots the windows, but everything you needed to dry is tucked safely indoors. For now, you sigh. A long, deep exhale. The kind you only get after you've wrestled 30 pounds of wet wool and won. Laundry in medieval times was never a one-day affair. It was a saga, a slow, aching, strangely satisfying ritual that reminded you of just how much effort goes into the little comforts. Like wearing a clean shift under your tunic, or having a tunic at all. You press the last stitch flat with your thumb and set the tunic gently atop the pile. Done, at least until next month. By now, your laundry pile is clean, dry, and more or less repaired. Congratulations, you've reached the final phase of this medieval ordeal, storing everything without ruining it immediately. And trust me, that's harder than it sounds when you live in a single-room cottage filled with smoke, rodents, and children with jam on their fingers. Let's begin with the folding. Unlike your modern drawer-stuffing methods, folding in the medieval era is an act of textile preservation. Linen shifts, chemises, and underclothes are carefully layered and rolled, not creased, to avoid deep wrinkles that might set in like tree bark. Wool, on the other hand, needs to breathe. Trapped air helps it stay fluffy and somewhat resistant to the damp. You sit on your heels, laying out your family's garments in neat stacks. Your back is protesting, your fingers are cracked, but there's something almost meditative about it. A rhythm to it. Clean piece. Fold. Stack. Repeat. Where do you put all? Great question. You've got exactly one wooden chest, a few wall pegs, and the hope that mice haven't chewed holes through everything again. Most people in your time store clothing in chests, simple wooden boxes lined with dried lavender, wormwood, or mint to discourage pests. You do the same, pressing bundles of herbs between garments like fragrant bookmarks. Historians still debate whether certain herbs were actually effective at deterring moths, or if they were just the medieval equivalent of potpourri. Either way, your chest now smells aggressively minty, which is a significant improvement over damp wool and regret. Of course, not everything fits. You have to triage what's used daily, what's ceremonial, what's secretly stolen from your sister-in-law, and should probably be hidden under the straw mattress, just in case she stops by. You hang the most frequently worn tunics on pegs driven into the wall. They dangle like sleepy ghosts, ready to be shrugged into again at sunrise. The finer linens, your one good veil, the shift you only wear on feast days, go at the bottom of the chest, wrapped in cloth like treasure. Now let's talk about vermin. Oh yes, mice, fleas, and brace yourself, silverfish. You've seen one skitter out of a folded hood before, and it nearly sent you to meet your maker. There's a reason cleanliness in the medieval era isn't just about pride. It's about survival. To guard against infestation, some households rub a thin layer of soot along the bottom of their storage chests. Others tuck tiny sachets of rosemary or crushed walnut shells between folds. You do all of the above and throw in a few dried beans for luck. Your grandmother swore by them. Mice don't like to share with legumes, she used to say, very seriously. You never questioned her. Then there's the issue of humidity. A modern closet might have a dehumidifier or a cedar block. You have a thin hope that it won't rain all week, and an open hearth that you keep gently stoked. Sometimes you angle your storage chest near the fireplace, not too close, or the linen yellows, but just enough to stay warm and dry. And still, no matter how careful you are, mildew sometimes wins. It creeps in like a silent thief. You'll open your chest one morning and find a faint splotch blooming like a cloud on your best tunic. You'll try vinegar. You'll try salt. You'll try prayer. Historians still argue about the effectiveness of medieval mildew remedies. Some recipes suggest soaking affected cloth in sour milk and sun-drying it on white stones. Others call for rubbing onion slices on the spot and reciting a charm. You try both. Neither works. The tunic becomes your new work smock. Problem solved. Clothing in the medieval era is, to be blunt, a precious resource. Most people own 2, maybe 3 complete sets of garments. That's it. Laundry day is less about wardrobe choices and more about strategic survival. You're always balancing cleanliness against weather, wear, and personal dignity. That's why storage is so sacred. A clean shift is more valuable than a silver cup. A warm, dry tunic is the difference between comfort and sickness. You've spent 2 full days washing, drying, beating, brushing, folding, and repairing. Now, you lay each piece down in its place like tucking in a child. And then, of course, you hear it, a splash. You turn your head slowly, dread curling up your spine. Your youngest has found the wash basin, the one you left half filled, with rainwater. And now there is a sopping linen under tunic, being triumphantly waved in the air, dripping across the packed earth floor like some sort of soggy victory flag. You take a deep breath, close your eyes, count to 10, curse gently in Latin, then retrieve the poor tunic, wring it out, and set it near the fire. Laundry never ends. It cycles like the seasons. You don't even get to enjoy the satisfaction of a full, folded chest before someone is already wearing yesterday's shirt and spilling porridge on it. Still, for a moment you sit. Let your eyes wander across the stacks. Each piece tells a story of everyday life, of labor, of love, and constant upkeep. You may not have a closet full of options, but what you do have is clean. For now. And in medieval life, for now is about the best guarantee you get. The fire crackles softly as you sit beside it, staring at your drying undertunic and feeling a strange mix of triumph and defeat. Laundry is technically finished, but you know better than to declare victory too early. The real challenge begins now, staying clean. Because in medieval life, filth is not a once-a-week inconvenience, it's a daily adversary. Let's walk through a typical day in your freshly laundered shift. You wake up. The floor is made of packed dirt, which means every step barefoot picks up a little dust and leaves a footprint like some kind of reverse blessing. You throw on your cleanest overdress, tie your apron, and immediately kneel down to stoke the hearth. Congratulations, you're now covered in ash. The soot creeps onto your sleeves, smudges your cheek, and somehow makes its way under your fingernails, despite you having just washed them in rose water last night. You sigh. This is how it starts. Next comes breakfast prep. You're grinding barley in a stone quern, which is heavy, exhausting work. You lean over, and suddenly you've got grain dust in your eyebrows and a small smear of flour where your elbow brushed the table. You're not even halfway through the morning, and your once pristine smock now looks like it's been through the Crusades. Historians still debate how often the average medieval person actually changed clothes. Some suggest weekly washing and bi-weekly outfit swaps. Others argue it varied wildly by region, class, and season. What's certain is this: staying clean was nearly impossible. Even walking outside means trouble. The village path is muddy year-round, except when it's icy, at which point it's basically frozen mud with an attitude problem. You dodge puddles like a court jester, hike up your hemline like a scandalous noble, and still somehow splash yourself halfway up the leg. Wool may resist water, but linen just drinks it in. Your clean shift starts to wilt like a disappointed lettuce. And then comes the livestock. The pigs escape their pen. Again, you are the first responder. They do not respect your authority. One brushes past you with a snort and a flourish of mud, leaving a perfect brown smear across your apron like a signature. By midday, your mental health is hanging by a thread, and your outfit smells like smoke, onions, and pig. You wonder briefly if people in modern times ever experienced this level of laundry betrayal. But despite the odds, you do have some defensive strategies. Aprons are your first line of protection. A good apron takes the brunt of kitchen grime, garden dirt, and toddler slime. You own 3. 2 coarse ones for everyday work, and 1 finer linen with embroidery for Sunday stew duty. You switch them out often, let them air near the window, and treat them with more reverence than your cousin's wedding tunic. You also keep a stash of cloth wipes tucked in a pocket. Little squares of worn-out shifts, now repurposed into emergency blotters. They're used for everything from wiping baby noses to dabbing grease off your brow to politely pretending your neighbor didn't just spill goat's milk on your floor. There's also the cloak trick. On wet days, you wear a heavy woolen cloak outdoors to absorb the worst of the splashback. It gets filthy, sure, but you never wash it. No one washes cloaks. You just beat them with a stick and hang them in the wind until they forget their sins. Still, the sense of inevitability lingers. Medieval clothing is a bit like a sponge. It absorbs your day. Every task, every step, every sneeze becomes part of the fabric. By evening, the clothes you so lovingly washed the day before are bearing the battle scars of soup spills, candle wax, flour, and some unidentifiable green smear you hope came from the herbs. And so, you find yourself at a crossroads. Do you change into your second shift before bed? Or do you risk staining that one too, and leave yourself without a clean backup for feast day? You decide to stay in your current outfit, and maybe, just maybe, give it a quick sponge off. Ah yes, the medieval spot clean. A bowl of warm water, a cloth, and some strong scrubbing on the worst of the stains. Sometimes you use vinegar. Sometimes you whisper kind words to the fabric. Either way, you dab, blot, and fan it dry near the fire, hoping no one notices the slightly darker circle on your sleeve in the morning. Historians still argue whether spot cleaning counted as doing laundry in medieval records. Some think it was simply a maintenance step, while others claim people saw it as part of the ongoing fight against dirt. You don't care. You're just trying to get the pig smell out of your cuff. You end the day by hanging your outer layers on the wall pegs again. Not because they're dry. No, they're definitely still damp, but because folding them now would trap moisture and guarantee mildew by morning. You leave your shift on, wrapping yourself in a blanket and curling up near the fire. The flicker of flame casts soft shadows on the wall. The room smells of herbs and with smoke and faint linen soap. For a few hours, you're still. And clean enough. Because in this life, clean isn't a state. It's a fleeting victory. A temporary truce. A moment where, for once, your sleeves aren't sticky and your hem doesn't squelch. And that's worth all the labor in the world. Morning breaks with a soft, gray light filtering through the wooden shutters, and you know, somewhere deep in your weary bones, that your briefly clean wardrobe is already in danger. Because today is market day, and nothing ruins fresh laundry quite like rubbing elbows with humanity, livestock, and the unforgiving architecture of a medieval street. You rise and dress with strategic caution. Shift first, still smelling faintly of lavender and smoke. Then your overdress, chosen for its lack of visible stains. Apron check. Cloak check. You're out the door, basket in hand, and instantly assaulted by a trifecta of elements. Mud, manure, and mystery smells. Let's take a walk, shall we? The village path is more rutted than usual. A recent rain has turned the track into a pudding of footprints and horse dung. You lift your hem to keep it safe, but, spoiler alert, gravity has other plans. One slip, and your skirt gets a stylish brown splash that reaches mid-thigh. Medieval laundry's natural predator, the traveling merchant wagon. As you trudge through the clamor of carts and cries, every sense is bombarded. A fishmonger waves a particularly assertive trout at you. The baker's child throws a crust in your general direction. Someone sneezes directly onto your shoulder. You wonder if they teach aim in medieval school, or if this is just your destiny now. Still, market day is essential. You need salt, a wedge of cheese, and maybe, if your barter goes well, a small cake of scented soap from the apothecary stand. That's your real prize. Soap is a luxury, not the silky, chemical-rich bars of the modern world, but rough, pungent little bricks made of animal fat and ash. If you're lucky, this one will have rosemary in it. If not, it'll still smell better than boiled socks. Historians still argue about how common soap use actually was in the Middle Ages. Some say it was widely used among lower classes. Others believe it was reserved for laundry, not skin. What's clear is that laundry soap was abrasive, homemade, and could double as a weapon in a pinch. You manage your errands with mild dignity. Only one incident involving a goat, and it didn't even touch you directly. Victory. But then comes the worst part, the tavern smoke. You're invited, nay summoned, into your cousin's home on the way back. It's barely past noon, but he's cooking stew, and the whole interior smells like beef, cabbage, and the ghost of 10,000 burned onions. You're polite. You sit on a bench that probably last saw soap during a lunar eclipse. You smile. You sip stew, and your cloak absorbs every scent like a cursed sponge. By the time you leave, you feel heavier. The stew, the smoke, the social expectations, all clinging to your clothes like extra layers. You carry it all back home, trailing the scent of other people's, cooking like some sort of low-budget incense vendor. Once home, you peel off the outer layers and assess the damage. The cloak goes over a beam near the hearth. Maybe the smoke will cancel out the other smells, like battling dragons with more dragons. Your shift has acquired a mysterious stickiness. Possibly honey, possibly worse. You don't ask questions. This is where your laundry routine shifts into damage control mode. Instead of a full rewash, you opt for selective cleaning. That apron stain, a paste of salt and vinegar. The cloak, a strong beating with a broom handle and a firm glare. The hem of your overdress, dab it with ale and hope for the best, because yes, ale was sometimes used for stain removal. It doesn't always work, but it makes the laundry smell oddly festive. You hang everything to dry with as much spacing as your tiny home allows. Pegs line the walls like primitive closet rods. You leave a small gap between the cloak and the stew-stained sleeve. You've learned your lesson about cross-contamination. Historians still discuss whether medieval people found laundry as frustrating as we do. Some records suggest they saw it as a routine, almost sacred act of cleansing. Others imply it was just another chore to survive, like grinding grain or dodging pigs. The truth is probably somewhere in between, necessary, laborious, and not exactly thrilling. And yet, you find moments of peace in it. As the garments sway near the hearth, you settle into your stool, feet tucked beneath you. There's a rhythm to the recovery process, a quiet satisfaction in outwitting the day's grime. You sip a cup of something warm, maybe ale, maybe thin broth, and watch as the steam from the drying cloth mingles with the firelight. It occurs to you that you've become a kind of laundry alchemist, turning filth into freshness, restoring the dignity of linen with little more than grit, water, and elbow grease. You rub a bit of soap into your palm and inhale deeply. Even the roughest laundry soap has its charm. It smells like effort, like care, like a refusal to be entirely swallowed by the mud and the mess of it all. And tomorrow you'll do it all again. Because in medieval life, you don't stay clean. You earn your way back to it, piece by piece, stain by stain. You wake the next morning with a stiff shoulder and the faintest sense of dread. The drying clothes on the peg beam whisper of yesterday's efforts, another day's partial victory, hanging limply over the hearth. You sigh and reach for the one item that haunts every medieval washer's dreams, the woolen blanket. You've avoided it for as long as possible, but it's time. The smell has gone from wood smoke and warmth to a kind of musty sheep with a secret society vibe. Plus, there's a visible patch of something questionable near the corner. You can't ignore it any longer. Wool is not like linen. Linen you scrub. Linen you wring out. Beat against rocks. Soak in soap and sunshine. Wool. Wool you fear. Because wool, as every medieval laundress knows, is temperamental. Wash it too harshly, and it shrinks into a child's cloak. Use hot water, and it felts into a fuzzy mat. Agitate it even a little too much, and it rebels, curling into itself like a hedgehog. You treat it delicately, like royalty in fabric form. Historians still debate how common it was for people to wash woolen garments at all. Some believe outerwear was never washed, only aired out. Others point to records of cautious hand-washing with rainwater and urine soap. The truth likely depended on status, resources, and how much your nose could tolerate. You decide to do it the proper way. A gentle rinse in the cool stream just beyond the garden wall. The stream is barely knee-deep, but it runs clean, mostly, and it's shaded by overhanging trees. You kneel on the flat rocks at the edge, lay the blanket over your lap, and begin the ritual. First, you soak it slowly, one edge at a time. The wool resists, bloating like a stubborn animal. You gently press out the water, careful not to twist. Then comes the ash soap, a bit smeared between your palms, mixed with rainwater in a bowl, and carefully dabbed along the dirtiest parts. The stain near the corner is particularly persistent. You don't even remember what caused it. Lentil soup, chicken feet, possibly the baby, possibly the dog, possibly both at once. You scrub, not hard, but with precision, a thumb's-width motion, back and forth, murmuring a little under your breath, like a washing incantation. The water darkens slowly, little clouds of life leaking out, and then the rinse. Cold, slow, delicate. You draw the fabric through the current, letting the stream do most of the work. Birds chirp. The air smells like mint and moss. For a moment, it's even peaceful, until the wind picks up. Suddenly, your soaking woolen masterpiece is flapping like a medieval flag of defeat. You grab it, cursing softly, but within PG-13 limits, and haul the blanket back to the shore. It weighs approximately 1 cow now. Dragging it home is its own adventure. You trudge up the hill, arms aching, feeling like you've just carried a soggy bear through a forest. At the door, you don't bother ringing it. You just lay it over the wooden frame of the pig pen, letting the sun do what it can. Will it dry by tomorrow? Unlikely. Will it smell better? Also unlikely. But it will feel loved. And in this era, that's enough. Now let's talk about storage. You can't just fold up your newly cleaned linens and stuff them into a damp corner. That's a fast track to mildew and the kind of musty smell that invites commentary from the village priest. So you lay them flat on wooden planks or hang them high on beams. Some households even stored their best linen in chests with dried herbs, lavender, sage, or rosemary, to repel moths and nose-wrinkling smells alike. Your own cedar-lined trunk holds your Sunday shift, your wedding chemise, which now doubles as a funerary garment, should you require it, and one particularly fine linen scarf that belonged to your grandmother. You lift it out occasionally, just to sniff it. It still smells faintly of wood smoke and mint, memory in fabric form. But what about shared laundry? What about the communal washhouse, you ask? In larger towns, or wealthier villages, there were indeed places where women gathered to wash clothes in tandem. These were noisy, splashy, gossipy affairs. You'd show up with your bundle, your soap, and maybe a flask of weak ale to make the work go faster. Children would splash in the shallows. Geese would honk disapprovingly nearby. Secrets would be spilled with the rinse water. Historians still argue whether these wash houses were seen as liberating social hubs or just another grind in the week. Likely both, but they were also a rare chance to hear news, swap recipes, or bemoan the sins of husbands who couldn't keep the bedclothes clean for more than 2 days. Back in your little cottage, you settle into your stool by the hearth, watching your laundry dry like sails in this still harbor. You sip something warm and sweet, perhaps a weak mead or an herbal tisane made from dandelion roots and fennel seeds. The air smells better already. You think back to everything you've scrubbed, rinsed, hung, and beaten with a stick this week. It's impressive, really. You're not just a washer. You're a stain whisperer, a soap sorcerer, the unsung hero of domestic hygiene. And somewhere deep down, you accept that it'll all need doing again in a few days. Because pigs don't wipe their hooves, toddlers don't care about aprons, and the laws of mud physics still apply to everyone. But for now, just for now, the wool blanket smells like cold water and faint rosemary, and that's enough. Laundry is done for now, but that doesn't mean your battle with clothing is over. No, now comes the part where you try to stay clean. And in medieval life, that's more of an ongoing joke than a realistic goal. It starts with your feet. Always your feet. You step out the door, and the earth reaches for you like an affectionate toddler. Dirt isn't a surface here, it's an atmosphere. Dry one day, sludge the next. You've got wooden pattens to lift your shoes off the mud. But let's not pretend they help. One misstep, and you're half submerged in a puddle that's suspiciously warm for the hour. You lift your skirt and try to hop. But hopping in medieval dress is like trying to pole vault in a duvet. The edge of your shift finds the puddle anyway. Of course it does. You go back inside. You change. Again. Here's the thing. You only own 2 or 3 of everything. So every decision, what to wear, what to risk staining, what to save for Sunday, feels like planning a heist. Do you wear your second best chemise, even though you might be threshing grain later? Do you risk the good apron because it's baking day, and you want to look respectable when the neighbor brings over his widowed cousin? Historians still debate exactly how often most people change their clothes. Some records say shifts were washed weekly. Others suggest they were worn until they were visibly sentient. It probably depended on your wealth, your social standing, and your personal tolerance for itchiness. You settle on an outfit that feels safe, but not showy. Your good enough shift, your patched over dress, and the apron you repaired with leftover thread and what might have been a shoelace. Outside again, the world remains rude. The chickens are especially energetic today. One flaps up onto your path and startles you into dropping the eggs. The apron catches one, but not the other 2. Splat. Yellow streaks your hem like a culinary crime scene. You sigh and adjust your apron to hide the mess. It works, sort of. No one's likely to stare too closely at your midsection. Not when they're too busy being splashed by the neighborhood baker, who's hauling a barrel of slop with all the grace of a drunken catapult. Medieval streets were not designed with cleanliness in mind. In fact, street is generous. What you've got is a shared gully with aspirations. Wastewater flows down the center, or sideways, or wherever gravity pleases. People toss scraps, spoiled food, even bathwater out windows with a warning shout. If you're lucky, the phrase "guard as low." Watch out for the water wasn't just a Parisian quirk, it was a survival mechanism. You learn to walk close to buildings and always look up. At some point, you get clever. You stitch a little flap onto the inside of your cloak to catch drips. It's your secret armor. You call it laundry insurance. Still, staying clean is a constant dance. You learn tricks. Rubbing crushed sage onto underarms to freshen up. Pinning a sprig of rosemary or pennyroyal inside your collar. Chewing fennel seeds for breath. Pouring a bit of vinegar into your rinse water to chase off the scent of wet wool and hubris. You even sew little bundles of dried herbs into your storage chests. Lavender, thyme, mint, to keep linen smelling more like a garden and less like defeat. Some women, especially in wealthier households, had linen underarm pads, reusable, replaceable little liners that kept sweat from soaking through their shifts. You, however, have repurposed an old scrap of sackcloth. It itches, but it works. Mostly. And don't forget the smoke. Ah yes, your old nemesis. Every fire leaves its trace. Your hair, your apron, even your teeth start to carry the tang of wood smoke. You've tried standing near mint bushes, waving your sleeves like a magical girl summoning freshness. You've even tried holding your breath when tending the fire. That lasted 10 seconds. Historians still argue whether people noticed their own medieval smell. Some argue they didn't mind, or didn't know any better. Others believe they did notice, which is why herbs, scented pomanders, and washing rituals were a real part of life. You're in the second camp. You notice. You care. You also know the futility of perfection. You're not aiming for pristine. You're aiming for clean enough that no one edges away from you at church. Which brings us to church clothes, the final test of laundry, reputation, and restraint. You only wear them once a week, and they live in a chest like relics. A white shift, carefully mended. A dark overdress with embroidery at the sleeves that only you know is hiding a cider stain. You lay them out the night before like offerings. Wearing them feels ceremonial. You walk straighter. You avoid puddles with acrobatic grace. You shoot geese like a royal. And when someone sneezes near you, you cover your outfit like a maiden protecting her virtue. It's a losing game, this war against filth. But you fight it with creativity, vinegar, and occasionally passive-aggressive prayers for better weather. You don't expect to stay clean, but you've learned the real trick. Look like you were clean at some point earlier today. And in medieval times, that's practically divine. As you finish adjusting your apron for the third time today, it occurs to you, somewhere between the soot on your sleeve and the hen feather tangled in your braid, that laundry isn't just a chore. It's a reputation, a currency, a way of saying things without actually saying them. Take, for example, status. The brighter and cleaner your linen, the more clearly you're announcing, someone in my household has time to beat cloth against rocks. It's a flex, a subtle, woven billboard of social standing. A noblewoman might not do laundry herself, but her shifts would be immaculately pressed, bleached with wood ash, and perhaps even perfumed with crushed roses and clove buds. You're lucky if yours smells less like turnips than it did yesterday, but still you try, because people notice. You pass the Reeves wife in the lane. She's wearing a chemise so crisp it might stand up on its own. She gives you a polite nod, eyes flicking toward your smock. It's acceptable, passable, maybe a touch of lie left in the seams. The Reeves wife doesn't need to say a word. Her laundry speaks for her. So does yours. Historians still debate just how much clothing signaled class in day-to-day village life. Some argue that laws about who could wear what colors and fabrics, called sumptuary laws, were mostly enforced in cities. Others say these subtle signals were part of every medieval community's social vocabulary, like knowing who always has fresh bread, or who borrows your ladle and never returns it. So yes, laundry is language. You keep walking past the mill where the water wheel creaks like a tired joint. There's something comforting in its rhythm, a reminder that everything cycles: mud, soap, mistakes, forgiveness. You reach the common green, where other women are laying linens out to sun bleach. It's one of the few times laundry goes public. You nod to a friend. She raises an eyebrow and jerks her chin at your drying cloths. Patch job came out decent, she says. That's high praise. Here, you trade tips like they're family secrets. Add salt to the last rinse. It keeps the color from bleeding. If you rub apple pulp on a wine stain while it's still fresh, it fades to a memory. Let your linens dry flat if you don't want the wind twisting them like a haunted rag doll. Someone even swears by steeping nettle leaves in vinegar and rubbing it into yellowed underarms. You try it once. You come out smelling like a salad and decide maybe it's not for you. But these little exchanges, they matter. They're part of a tradition, a quiet, communal kind of wisdom passed from hand to hand, bucket to bucket. And then there are the rules. Unspoken, of course. Don't lay your wash too close to someone else's unless invited. Don't brag about your soap recipe unless someone asks. Don't touch anyone's drying underthings. Ever. You smile as you recall the one time old Nan violated that last one. She'd borrowed a neighbor's drying chemise because it looked like hers, and only realized her mistake when she found herself wearing sleeves 6 inches too short and someone else's embroidered initials across the chest. They still call her Nan Two Sleeves. Every community has a few laundry legends. There's the tale of the girl who used goose fat instead of tallow in her soap, claimed it made everything soft as clouds, until a neighbor's tunic attracted every stray dog in town. Or the story of a young monk who tried to bleach his robes with sour goat milk, hoping for divine inspiration. The result was so pungent he was exiled to the stables for a week. You learn these stories like you learn the seasons, through observation, repetition, and the occasional disaster. At home, your linens are nearly dry. The wind is turned, bringing the scent of smoke and damp leaves. You gently lift each piece, feeling for hidden moisture. You fold them, not perfectly, but with care, and stack them inside your cedar chest. There's a small satisfaction in it. Not pride exactly, but completion. You glance at your soap bowl, scrape nearly clean, and mentally note that you'll need to render more tallow soon. Maybe this time you'll try adding lavender ash instead of plain lye. Just for the experiment. Laundry may be eternal, but it doesn't have to be boring. You turn back to the hearth, where the wool blanket still sulks over its drying beam. It's nearly ready, just slightly damp at the corners. You flip it like a pancake, then take a moment to lean your head against the wooden beam. The rhythm of the day slows. You've washed, rinsed, carried, dodged, soaked, wrung, and aired. You've survived. And tomorrow, when someone spills onion stew down the front of your only dress, or when the baby decides the floor is a suitable toilet. You'll start it all again. Not because you love laundry, but because in a world where so much is out of your control, weather, war, taxes, that strange squeak your front door started making yesterday. Keeping something clean feels like a small act of hope, even if it's just for a day. You know what they never tell you about laundry? It never really ends. Not just in the poetic, life is a cycle way, but in the literal, socks on the floor sense. As you fold the final piece of linen and place it carefully in the storage chest, tucked beside a sachet of dry thyme and an old spoon you swore you'd fix last spring, you already see the next batch forming in the corners of the room. There's the apron stained with carrot tops from dinner prep. The toddler's shift with a mysterious dark splotch. Please let it be mud. A pile of hearth rags that have seen too much and probably deserve retirement. Laundry is the ghost of yesterday, clinging to tomorrow's hope. And so, it helps to keep a few tricks up your sleeve. Sometimes literally, like the spare bit of soft wool tucked in your cuff to dab at a sudden spill, or the sliver of soapstone you use like chalk on greasy spots, or your special mixture of dried sage and crushed eggshells for scrubbing hard-set grime-off collars. Not everyone would know these things, but you do. Historians still argue how widespread such household hacks were, whether they were passed down through generations or born of sheer necessity in homes where money was short but messes were abundant. One monk wrote of rubbing wine sediment into fabric to clean ink spills. Another recipe suggests using stale beer to soften linens. You tried that once. It smelled like disappointment. Of course, there's always the neighbor with an opinion. You know the type. Swears by brushing ash into your seams for good luck, or tells you that hanging socks during a full moon wards off weevils. You humor them. Mostly, laundry makes you superstitious in small ways. You find yourself believing in lucky drying days. Those mornings when the wind isn't too strong, the sun not too harsh, and the birds too full of worms to target your sheets. You save your best linens for those moments, praying the universe doesn't sneeze on your efforts. And speaking of sneezes, health is tied up in this mess too. Everyone knows a damp shift invites chills, and chills become fevers, and fevers, well, you've seen it happen. A careless drying day can lead to a week in bed or worse. So you become meticulous. You test fabrics between finger and thumb. You learn the exact weight of a dry smock, the precise texture of a half-damp underdress. You sniff your own sleeve like a sommelier judging laundry notes. Oak smoke with top notes of goat barn. But jokes aside, you're good at this. You have to be. Clean clothes may not win wars, but they do keep peace. Between siblings fighting over whose tunic smells worse. Between spouses bickering over whose turn it is to wash the rags. Between neighbors who just love to gossip about the stains on your Sunday cloak. Let's not pretend medieval folks didn't gossip. A visible grease smear could spark 3 weeks of speculation and a sly comment during Mass. A bleach mark might earn a raised brow and the whispered, "Trying too hard, isn't she?" So you navigate it all like a diplomat in a war zone. Neutral colors, well-timed repairs, and the occasional strategic patch shaped like a flower. It's not vanity. It's armor. Even children aren't spared the game. You remember being scolded for tracking in mud or using your hem as a napkin. Now you find yourself doing the same to your own offspring, shaking your head as if you hadn't once tried to wash soot off your face using snow and a handful of moss. Funny how the habits pass on. You pause, suddenly remembering your grandmother's soap recipe. She used lemon balm, when she could find it, to cut the sharpness of lye. The smell brings back the image of her wrinkled hands beating cloth by the riverside, singing a tune no one else seems to remember. You find yourself humming it now, off-key but content. That's the thing. Laundry is rarely just laundry. It's memory. It's love, disguised as folded shirts and scrubbed aprons. It's grief, wrapped in the robe of someone who'll never wear it again. It's hope, hung to dry in the weak spring sunlight. It's every thread you've mended, every corner you've pressed flat, every drop of sweat from your brow as you try it again, to lift a stain that refused to budge. Some days you win. Other days, you wear an apron over the stain and call it fashion. Either way, you endure. Because laundry is also ritual, a rhythm, a comfort. There's something sacred in the simple act of restoring what was used and worn, of turning dirty into clean, of claiming, in a world full of uncertainty, this small space of order. And if that's not magic, what is? You stoke the fire once more, eyeing the final piece, still drying by the hearth. It's an old linen square, patched and yellowed. Not much to look at, but it's yours. Clean. Enough. The last corner of your home is quiet now. The fire's just embers, glowing faintly behind their veil of ash. The bucket sits empty, its work done. And beside you, folded cloth rests in neat, slanted stacks, each one a victory in cotton and steam. You move slowly now, as if your limbs have softened along with the cloth. Even the floor creaks gentler beneath your step. You lift the final drying piece from its peg. It's warm, slightly stiff at the seams, but dry enough. A faded kerchief, one of your oldest. Once white, now a dignified ivory, embroidered clumsily with your initials. You hold it a moment, turn it over. The thread is loosening along one edge. It's earned that. You place it with the rest. And just like that, laundry day has ended. But only for now. You glance to the side of the hearth where tomorrow's garments hang, faintly stained and wrinkled with promise. It's always like this. A brief, rare moment of stillness between the cycles. You sit, just for a moment. It's the first time today your hands aren't wet or full. And this stillness, it isn't empty. It's earned. Remember the chaos at dawn? The awkward dance over who got the good soap. The neighbors comparing their drying lines like they were hosting a fashion show for ghosts. The spattered dress you had to scrub 3 times. The lice sting still nibbling at the side of your thumbnail. And now this hush. Historians often debate the rhythm of medieval labor, whether days were truly as grueling as modern minds imagine, or if there were more pauses, more laughter. But those who've studied diaries, letters, even wash ledgers from the period, agree on one thing. There was pride in the work, especially domestic work. Quiet pride, the kind you didn't say aloud, but stitched into every folded hem and tucked sleeve. Because laundry day wasn't just a task, it was a full-body confession of your week, your household, your effort, and maybe, yes, your limits too. There were days you couldn't get everything done, days the wind fought you, the soap crumbled, or your energy just faltered. You showed up anyway, dragged the tub, heated the water, scrubbed, not for applause, for necessity, for rhythm, for care. And if that doesn't count as perseverance, what does? You lean back against the wall, letting your eyes drift toward the roof beams above. A spider has built a fine little palace in the corner. You consider relocating it. Another time. Outside, night has crept across the village. Chimneys puff quietly in the dark. A dog barks once, then settles. Somewhere down the lane, someone is still wringing out cloth late, cursing in a soft voice, so as not to wake the children. You smile. You've been that person too. The hearth pops softly. The linen smell in the room is comforting, woody, herbal, with a touch of ash and effort. You breathe it in. There's something about clean laundry, even imperfectly done, that makes a space feel more like home. And maybe that's the best part. That quiet transformation. From the morning's chaos to this, a room softened by steam, a floor swept, and a stack of cloth that says, you did it. Somehow. Tomorrow, of course, it begins again. There'll be more dirt, more spills, more surprises in the hems of tunics. Someone will bleed on something they shouldn't. A chicken will mistake your clean chemise for a perch. A neighbor will bring over a shirt just to soak. That turns into your project for 3 days. But for now, this moment is yours. You wrap the kerchief gently around your hands. Fingers relax now. The room hums with silence. Even the soap feels like it's resting. You lie back on the mat. You close your eyes. Not asleep yet, but right on the edge. Balanced like a shirt flapping gently on a clothesline in summer air. And now, dear listener, let it all go. Let the lice smell fade from your fingertips. Let the warmth of the hearth settle deep into your bones. Let the water slosh gently in memory, and the soft friction of cloth become the rhythm of your breath. There's nothing else you need to do tonight. No buckets to fill. No stains to chase, no hems to mend, just the soft hush of clean linen, folded and forgotten, and the quiet reassurance that tomorrow will come, mud and all, and you will meet it, one cloth at a time. You've walked through a day centuries behind us, but the weight of care, of tending to a home, of small victories made with quiet hands, it still resonates, still means something, still belongs to you. So breathe a little deeper. Picture the drying green, swaying gently under the moonlight. A single shift flutters in the breeze, caught in no rush to dry, no hurry to be worn. The air smells of time, warm stone, and effort well spent. You are there, and here, safe, still, soft in the folds of your own evening. Let your shoulders loosen. Let the flickering fire of the day burn low. You've done enough. You are enough. And just like your basket, finally empty, you are allowed to rest. Good night.